All right, we're recording, and I have I have some of the 3-story method editors here. Yeah!
Yay!
It does feel, thanks for doing that with me. Y'all made me feel like I was on the Muppet Show. That makes me really happy. Okay, so let's go around and introduce yourself. Aaron, I'm gonna make you go first. Tell us your name and what your editing specialty is right now.
All right, I'm Aaron Goldblatt. I operate under the pseudonym V.E. Griffith, which is where you can find me. And my specialty is doing sci-fi and fantasy line and content edits.
Nice. All right. Miss Catherine, why don't you go next? Because I caught you coughing.
Sure. Hi, I'm Miss Catherine, also known as Catherine Hernandez. My editing specialty is with epic writers, so those who write 200,000+ words.
That's awesome. That's a lot of words. Christine, you want to go?
Sure. I'm Christine Daigle. My specialty, sci-fi fantasy, trad pub, serial fiction, character consistency.
Nice.
That's it.
And you wrote the section of the didn't you write the section of the rubric we're talking about today?
I wrote the 3-story method chapter on character consistency. I did. Yeah.
Yeah, you did.
Yeah, I did.
Yeah. Kathy, why don't you introduce yourself?
I'm Kathy Peeper, and my specialties are romance and paranormal.
Nice. Catrice?
My name's Catrice McKee, and I write speculative fiction, but I edit just about everything else. And my specialty is your first chapter and line editing and deep POV.
Yeah, so that first chapter is super important too, because if you can't hit that, ain't nobody getting to number 2.
True.
JP, go for it.
Hello, I'm P Reimflesh, writer of things dark, strange, and queer. I like, I guess my specialty would be LGBT, fantasy, or sci-fi, but I like everything. So yeah, that's awesome. That.
Very cool. All right, well, thank you all for coming on. We're doing this once a month to come on and work through the 3-story method story rubric. For those listening that don't know or watching that don't know what the story rubric is, oh, people are watching. I can just share it. That's right. I always forget that people watch this sometimes. So this is the 3-story method rubric, story rubric, and what it does is it breaks your story down piece by piece. And lets you know what it looks like when it's underdeveloped, what it looks like when it's fair, what it looks like when it's good, and what it looks like when it's excellent. We've probably all used, for those who have been in school, I'm sure you've used a rubric at some point. You can find your own copy of this at theauthorlife.com. Scroll all the way to the bottom and you can find it. And today we're talking about characterization. And so I'm just going to read the excellent version of the characterization instead of reading all 4. I won't make y'all listen to me read all 4. And then we're going to talk about characters. So an excellent characterization in a book or in a scene, in a book, in a scene, I don't know. An excellent characterization in whatever it is you're writing. Characters are unique, engaging, realistic, dynamic, and likable. Readers can become raving fans of the characters, quoting lines to their friends and dressing like them in cosplay, which I think is a brilliant explanation of being a raving fan of a character. So before I get on, any thoughts on the rubric? How often, let me ask this question. I'm immediately going off questions on all of y'all. I know you're super excited about it. Sorry, how difficult on a scale of 1 to 10 for a writer is it to nail characterization? 10 being probably the most difficult thing they're going to have to do in writing a book, and 1 being the easiest thing they're going to have to do writing a book. 1 being like, you don't even need to think about it. Just write, characters happen.
I think that depends.
Yeah.
But go ahead, Kathy.
I was going to say 8 because I think it is one of the harder things.
Nice. Kathy, what do you find the hardest thing about it is for you?
I always kind of have to go deep into their backstory to kind of figure out what their wounds are and what they kind of need to get over to get their happy ever after. So
Yeah, getting that character growth right can be really tough. I find that a lot of times I don't figure out what the character is growing until I'm like 2/3 of the way through the book. And then I'm like, oh, I should go back and rewrite the first of it because this is what the character is actually doing. Anybody else? Anybody else want to weigh in?
I think.
So
Go ahead, JP. Nope.
okay. So yeah, I think it depends, and I think partly why I'm saying that is I think it depends on like how you grow up and how you view other voices or other characters in your head. So like when I was in high school, I was big into theater. I did theater every year. I had to be a different character. Even several characters within a play at some point. So like I had to figure out how these characters talked, how they acted differently. So I have all these voices in my head. So I think characterization has somewhat of an ease to me because I'm able to shift that consciousness around. But I think other people it's different.
Nice.
So going along with that, I also think it depends on what kind of character you're creating. If you're creating a character that you're used to experiencing, then it'll be much easier to write that character. But if you're trying to step into someone else's shoes, then you've got to do more work, and that's when it gets more difficult, I think.
Yeah, that's a great note. I also find pairing cast members is tough for me. Like sometimes I can get a really solid character voice in a scene, especially if it's like a side character that's only showing up every once in a while. But effectively pairing cast members across a whole novel so that they're working in their growth as a character together, I think is a real art form that so I've read some authors that just do it naturally, but I think for most of us it's work. It's something that we really got to focus on and work on. Catrice, Christine, or Aaron, y'all want to weigh in on whether it's hard or easy for you?
I think it depends. And I think, with all the different writers I've worked with or, I'm friends with, I think it really depends on the writer. I have some writer friends that all they want to do all day is write characters and like forget plot. And then some are the reverse. Like I will plot you out in detail, but I don't know what to do with the character. So I think it really depends on the writer and kind of, what your strength or passion is.
That's a good way to think about it.
Yeah. For me, it tends to be pretty difficult if I want the character to grow and change over the course of the story. And that, well, not all characters do. If you look at The Martian and Mark Watney, he doesn't grow and that he doesn't change. He's the same guy when he lands on Mars as when he leaves, and that's deliberate. Andy Weir has said that that's the story he wrote. But if you want a character that grows and changes, it's a lot harder to pull that off and make it consistent and make it believable.
Yeah, I think it's interesting in The Martian it's that way, because in his later books it's not. Like the character in Project Hail Mary has massive growth through the book. Anyway, it's a fascinating thing.
I found that basically it depends on the character. Some characters are very easy to write, and then others they're like a puzzle, and you just have to kind of, like you say, dig into the backstory. But I've had a couple that just walked onto the page. I wasn't even expecting them, and they just kind of sucked all the attention out of the scene. So some come fully formed. It's very strange.
Yeah, they're born right there. I've had a couple like that too, and I find usually my most unique character voices are that way. Something about the voice just clicks, and then it just like appears on the screen, which is weird when it happens. You're like, where did that come from? All right, favorite character. No, let's do favorite cast. Favorite cast of characters in literature, because we've talked about we've broached a little bit about like writing a single character, but I do think that like building a whole cast, that's tough, especially when we want the characters to sound different. I know most writers that I edit suffer from monomouth, meaning all of the characters sound the same. So you really just have kind of a one beat cast. So let's talk about writing a great cast. What's your favorite cast?
Mine is Pride and Prejudice.
Ooh.
That whole family, they just sparkle. They're very different from one another. anyone that's talking, you know who it is. And that goes for the secondary characters too.
Mhm.
So just, and I know the movies bring it to life, but when you're reading the book, it does the same thing.
Yeah, you know, I was shocked. I busted it out recently just to look at some stuff for dialogue, and I was looking at the first chapter, and I was shocked at how prominent the mother and the father's voices are in that first chapter, because the first chapter is the two of them talking about their daughters, and I was blown away. I was like, man, A, the chapter is almost all dialogue, which is interesting, and B, it's their voices are so strong. Like, it's just great. The mother is obnoxious right off of the bat, and the father's super passive right off of the bat. It's a nice pairing to get that like super obnoxious voice paired along, like that annoying, manipulative, passive aggressive voice next to the like wise, but you know, wanting to be a bystander voice of the father, which is a really great combo. Yeah.
There's a reason that's the like romance standard for all times, right?
Yeah.
Right? Amazing.
Yeah.
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 The best one that I've read recently, honestly, was on the Cerulean Sea,
Same.
which some of your listeners may be familiar with.
Yeah.
You know, that was a really, really good book and a really neat exercise in character and in character voice.
Yeah. Did you have a so for readers that haven't read it, it follows Simon, who's kind of a chubby bureaucrat who goes out to this orphanage to talk to I'm forgetting the caretaker's name. Does anybody remember the name of the caretaker at the orphanage? I can't remember. He's Simon's love interest.
Yeah.
And he's got a whole quandary of you know, interesting children that are at this orphanage. But Aaron, did you have a favorite voice from the cast?
Oh, favorite voice for me was Lucy.
Yeah.
Absolutely, hands down, it was Lucy, and it was just, it's like he was at once the fire and brimstone, you know, I'm gonna destroy you and melt your insides and all of those things, but he was still a 6-year-old child, and it was clear from the way he talked that he was a 6-year-old child who was talking about melting your insides.
Yeah, it's excellent. He's the Antichrist again for people who haven't read the book. I'm not spoiling anything. You find out in chapter 3.
Oh, right on. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's right at the beginning.
Yeah. The strange part is I was going to say the same thing. That was my pick. Not that book necessarily, but that book, and also TJ Klune's Under the Whispering Door. Like, if you want to
that's on
see
my
how to write a cast of characters, he's got it down. I mean, it's just, everyone is unique. Everyone is interesting. Everyone's wants and needs are clear. And, you know, all the pairings are perfect. So I really can't think of a better author to recommend for character cast. It's perfection.
That's awesome. Yeah. Is Under the Whispering Door good? It's like on my
Yes,
list.
if you loved House on the Cerulean Sea, you will love it, except it will wreck you and you will bawl. So
It's true.
yeah.
It's just dropped one book down my list.
I'm sorry.
Because I don't want to cry right now. Yeah, that's cool. Anybody else? Favorite cast?
So mine's from a young adult series, from Tamara Pierce, and it's the Becca Cooper series. And her other books are amazing. Her female characters are all unique and different, and you can hear it, you can feel it. You love the love interests because they're all different.
Oh, that's
and
great.
it's great. So you have everything from like deep medieval slang that the characters speak to like proper knight speech. So it's really a large range of characters, and it's really cool to like hear them. You can even tell like when a god is talking in like the book,
Cool.
just because of how like they're talking. So definitely recommend her books.
Yeah, and that's a really nice thing about historical fiction and fantasy, is being able to use the like station of characters in order to single out their voices. Is really, you know, like the knights speak like knights and the peasants speak like peasants and the gods speak like gods. That's really cool.
Funnily enough, mine is also Tamora Pierce, but the Circle of Magic series.
No.
That's the one I grew up on, and the 4 characters all suffer different types of trauma. Like one was locked away in a room for way too long. Another completely cut off from her entire culture. Another was grown up homeless, and another like is feared from their family. But they all have to come together, and they all have to like work together, work through their trauma, and like the way that they're just like characterized there, the way that they approach their trauma is so different, but the fact that they work together is just so like wonderfully put.
That's
I
awesome.
agree. I read that series too.
It's very cool. Kathy, have you gone yet? Do you have a favorite
I
cast?
haven't. I don't know if this is cheating because this is TV, but I was gonna say Buffy the Vampire Slayer.
Yeah,
I,
great
I
pick.
love that.
That's awesome. Yeah, that's a fun cast too, and it pieces really well together. Any of those, like, I feel like to nail those kind of like group dynamic casts, you really have to have varieties of characters in there, all with different. And I think, Christine, you said this earlier, but I think with Buffy especially, they really harp on the different characters' wants and needs, and like comparing and contrasting their wants and needs so they complement and complement and rub against each other creates that like natural conflict. And when you have a cast like that, like pairings of cast members when their wants align, and then those become contrarians when their wants compete with one another, it's a nice way to go about that. Catrice, did you give us a book? Did you give us a cast yet?
Yeah.
Yeah, you did. You did. You said, yeah, you did. I think mine is, I was thinking a lot about this. I'm really stuck on A Man Called Ove. Did any of y'all read that by Friedrich Buchner? It won the Pulitzer a couple years ago, but it's about an old man who is experiencing suicidal ideations. And there's this Pakistani family. I think they're Pakistani. They live across the street. They've newly moved in, and they continuously interrupt his suicide attempts with their kind of like large family nonsense. And it's a super heartwarming book. But I think what's so nice about it is he does a really great job of pairing a very like cantankerous mean characters can be hard to write because they're difficult for the reader to care about. And what he does is he takes this family that is very endearing and shows how they appreciate Ove. And so you come to love Ove through them. And then he has a second stream running where he's flashing back to how Ove met his wife, who's now passed. And so you get to see Ove through his wife's eyes, and by like translating this difficult character through the eyes of the characters around him, you really fall in love with this really cantankerous, angry, mean man. And by the end of the book, just absolutely want him to thrive. So it's the cast in that book works really well to create that conflict throughout the story. And I keep coming back to it. I have his other one. He also wrote one called Anxious People, which I've started, and the cast in that one is also really great. It's a closed box story, meaning that like 7 people are in an apartment and they're talking about a bank robbery that happened down the street. And there's a lot of interviews from police officers, and yeah, but it's also a fun cast in that one too. Okay, so we've talked about casts. Thinking about all that you've read, because I know y'all read a ton. I know that there are certain characters that I see all the time in people that I edit, and every time I get one, I'm like, oh, I don't want another one of these. I don't want to talk about those. I want to talk about the characters that you don't get to see. What's a character that you'd like to see more often?
You know what? I want to jump on this because it's just on the back of what you said, and maybe a little bit contrary to what's in the rubric. But I like unlikable or hard to like characters, or characters that start off that way. And I know they're a hard sell sometimes, but I enjoy it. Like when you're talking about Man Called Ove, Under the Whispering Door starts with this character that is a horrendous, awful, high up attorney who's, I'm going to spoil the first chapter, so skip a few seconds ahead if you don't want to hear it, but he's with his secretary and she's crying to him about all the things that are going on in his life. And he's just trying to get her to shut up so he can fire her. So like, and he's just a horrific person, right? But I loved it. I love reading about him. And I really love it when characters start off that way. I know it's a little bit tricky, but you know, when you think about it, you can see it over and over again when you have these characters that are unlikable or hard to like, but there's something about them that makes them sympathetic, right? Or there's something about them that you can see there's going to be something redeeming about them along the line, especially when I have unlikable women. I would like to see more unlikable women in my stories.
Nice. And
Yeah.
just a cheap trick as an author, if you want to write an unlikable character, but you want your reader to connect with them, put a character in their life that absolutely loves them.
Mm-hmm.
And that communicates to the reader subconsciously, no, you should like this character too. Like
Yeah.
it's this cheap trick that we can do with a cast to be like, oh, this person's horrible, but this person really likes them, so you should like them too.
Yeah,
Or
or you
dog.
do the save the cat moment. I can't remember the movie, but there's some like old Clint Eastwood movie where he's just an absolute jerk and just kills everybody. But when he's coming up to the house, there's this little kid that's like, oh, my mom told me like to watch out for kids from the bank. And he's like, I'm not from the bank, like get inside, right? Like
Yeah.
he's saving this little kid. So even though he's a jerk, you can see that he has a heart, or he's sympathetic, or there's something redeemable about him,
Yeah.
right? So
Mhm.
yeah.
Getting that out front.
Yep.
Anybody else character you want to see more of?
Underdogs. I don't know why, but there aren't enough. So like I like to see somebody that's maybe down on their luck. One of the ones that springs to mind is the captain from Master and Commander. Shoot, what's his face? Anyway, he's really down and out when it begins. And in fact, when he runs into the doctor, who is kind of like his foil throughout the series, they hate each other on sight almost. And they become friends over time, but and almost inseparable. But I like the underdog. He's not the guy that you would pick. And the same thing goes with Horatio Hornblower. I don't know why I'm on a C thing, but sea tails. But he's kind of an underdog. He's too old when he goes in, and so the other guys are like all over him because he's too old when he joins the Navy. And anyway, kind of the way it goes. I really like the underdogs, the ones that nobody's rooting for except you are.
Yeah, that rags to riches character arc makes a really nice feeling at the end of the book when they finally win and you get to celebrate. That's awesome. Anybody else? Characters you want to see more of?
I'm a big fan of the reluctant hero. The hero's journey where the lead character doesn't want to go on the adventure. My classic example is Randall Thor in the Wheel of Time series.
Yeah.
He does not want this. He just wants to go back to his little town and do his little thing. All three of them, one of them wants to be a blacksmith. It's they don't want this. They don't want to be part of this world-changing event. They get dragged into it kicking and screaming, and they hate every second of it. And which is the direct opposite of something like Frodo Baggins, who steps up and rah, we're going to go destroy the ring. Yeah, fine, okay, great. It's a good story. I want somebody who's dragged to Mount Doom kicking and screaming.
That's really funny. That's awesome.
Going on that, I'm just thinking, because he's talking hero's journey, I love opposite hero's journey. I would love to see something that is not her hero's journey, that is heroine's journey, or is a hero's journey that turns into a heroine's journey, or main characters who are community oriented versus individually oriented. I would love to see more of that as well.
Yeah, and that's kind of when you talk about heroine's journey, you know, the hero has the like transformative moment. The hero's journey has the transformative moment where they go it on their own. Please ignore gender in this conversation because the gender isn't actually important to
Relevant,
the characterization. But the but the heroine's journey, they build community along the way, and the community saves. You know, this is a weird. I was watching with my 7-year-old. We've been watching Maya and the Three on Netflix, which is a really interesting cartoon, and which I absolutely love. And it's a heroine's journey story, which is it's really fantastically done. Yeah. Okay. Anybody else? Type of character you want to see?
Yes, this one's an interesting one. I want to see more feminine characters who are allowed to just be feminine. Like, why do they have to hate everything that is so pretty? They can't wear their nice dresses. Like, dude, go ahead and wear your dress and wear your makeup, and it's okay to like girly stuff. Like, that would be nice to see more of. I just read a book that the main character is extremely feminine for the 1800s that she's in, but she still cuts open bodies as a medical forensics. Like, so she still does that, but she likes her silk slippers that she like has to step around blood in. So like, it's okay to have feminine characters, and I would love to see it more.
So yeah, I wonder, what do you think it is that we have such a fascination with tomboys?
It's the idea of we're not like the other girls. And the easiest way to do it is to make them a tomboy. And it's just
Interesting.
become such a cultural standard of being like, I'm not like them. So
Yeah.
that's how they're able to show it.
Yeah. I love Laura Lippman's Tess McGonigan detective books. But now that you're talking about it, she is very much the like tomboy, rough and tumble reporter, you know, detective. So yeah, you just had me thinking about I don't know that I can find in my head a series around a super feminine lead character.
Tamara Pierce does a good job with some
Okay.
of her characters with that, because one series is all here's the tomboy knight. The next one is this is the very soft, feminine girl who is, you know, kicking butt all over the place.
Nice.
And then the next one is like a very feminine knight who loves to also be really pretty, but has no problem taking out a sword and cutting off somebody's head. So stories
awesome.
like that we need more of.
Yeah, that's cool. I like that a lot.
And just to add on to that, more male people who identify as male who have those feminine characteristics as main characters. Like this is TV, but I watched Generation on HBO, and like the main character Chester is just such a wonderful character, and he has those like effeminate traits to him, but like it's just a wonderful story in my opinion. It's a very different approach to just storytelling. But yeah, that's my opinion.
Yeah, no, that's really great. I don't know about y'all, but I got to say, like, I don't think I've ever, as a writer, explored that characterization, which makes me either like Catherine, the what you're talking about, or JP, what you're talking about, and that actually makes me a little bit sad. My own writing.
Book.
Yeah, that's right. Next book, JP and I write a Vela. We can do it in the next episode. Do it next week. Yeah. Anybody else? I've lost track of who's talked and who. I'm enjoying the conversation. I've lost track of who's talked and who hasn't. Anybody else have a character that they want to see more of? No.
I do want to add another one. Sorry.
Yeah.
But I do really like tricksters as character, or as like the forefront characters. And I think that this hits on both ends of the spectrums of like highly intelligent tricksters and kind of like the doof trickster. So I'm thinking like Margot from Magicians, very intelligent trickster, uses her voice as the way in which she wins battles. But then I'm also thinking like Yelena from Black Widow movie, but she has kind of that like quote unquote bumbling idiot that you would normally attribute to a male, but she's female. And she's also just this trickster character. Like she uses her voice and of course her actions to kind of win in a fight. But I want to see more of those characters in the front.
Yeah, that's cool. I also I've been very into writing super broken characters lately. I don't know about y'all, but maybe that's just where we are in life. But I've on the side, I'm talking like once a month, I dabble in a chapter. I'm working on a book with a the dude. It's a love story, and the dude has major anger issues that he's dealing with. And then on the other side, the woman has serious fear issues post pandemic. She doesn't want to leave her house. So it's it's been a fun challenge to figure out how to get somebody who doesn't want to leave her house in a rom-com. But that's yeah, that's been a
Oh,
I really like broken characters that like have major, not just like flaws that they're going to overcome in the story, but flaws that are like, yeah, they ain't never overcoming this flaw. Like this is like part of, 30 years of counseling before we get past this. Yeah. Um, Anybody else? Characters you want to see?
this kind of goes along with what JP said, but I was kind of going to say that I kind of like the character that acts stupid on the outside, but is actually smart on the inside.
Nice.
Oh.
Can you think of an example? Do you have one off the top of your head?
Yeah, I was kind of thinking of the Scarlet Pimpernel, where he's a spy, but he acts like he's just like this dandy, but then he's actually the spy that goes and rescues people, from the guillotine and all
awesome.
that stuff. So yeah.
Very cool. Okay, let's do one last question. So I'm listening to this. I'm a writer. I'm like knee deep in a novel. I'm like in the messy middle. I don't know what I'm doing anymore. I'm questioning whether or not this book should even be written. Um, I'm not speaking from personal experience, y'all. I'm just generalizing. What is something that writer can do right now to improve the characters they're working in? Y'all are all fantastic editors. You're knee deep in a book. What's something that writer can do?
Feel the emotion of the character. I feel like their emotions really will help move them forward. So
Yeah,
like,
that'll take your dialogue 10 times farther too if you empathize with the character.
And those emotions are going to be driven by their internal and external wants and needs. What is their emotional wound? What do they need? What's their internal need? Where do they need to go as a person, even if they don't recognize it, especially if they don't recognize it? Those are going to drive their actions. It's going to drive their dialogue. It's going to drive their behavior. It's going to drive their thoughts.
yeah.
Catherine, this is a weird question, but I'm just going to put it to you. How do you empathize with the character differently at a book level and at a scene level? Is it different? Is it the same?
I feel different. So at a scene, because when I build my characters, I like to do if they're angry, how would they act normally? So like if this is all normal, how do they do stuff? And then at a scene level, in that situation, I can then see if they would follow how they would actually act, or if that's when they shift something. And so I feel like in that scene, you would look at it very small and be like, all right, are they actually going to punch this person because they're afraid, or are they actually just going to freeze?
Nice.
And then when you look at the book, you can see how they can start from being really shy and being very closed off, for an example, and how they grow to being, no, I don't mind punching that person if they'd hop out and scare me.
That's nice. Yeah. Christine, you were nodding. Would you add anything to that?
No, I agree with that. I mean, I think you have to know what your overall arc is for a character in your novel, but you also have to look at it at a micro level, at a scene level. And how you build character is not through description, but through action, right? Like you say talk is cheap. So, a character saying I'm this way, or someone saying, oh, the character is this way, it doesn't build a character. You want to build a character, you have to build actions. So every scene you're thinking about their goal, what their obstacle is going to be in most cases, not always an obstacle. Sometimes something good comes along, and how they're going to react to that conflict. And an action is really a decision. You can't have action without decision. So,
yeah. So just to be
you know,
clear about what you're saying, it's not action as in like I stick my hands in my pockets.
right.
We're
Not
talking
like,
about action as like the choices that they're making
yeah.
at a scene and a book level.
And that's how you make a character, is by character is action, and action is decision. You have to have a decision that drives that action, which goes back to consistent wants and need. Why you have to look at, why is the character acting this way? What's their motivation? What's this cue or stimulus that's come along? And how are they reacting to it, and why? What's the threat, or what's the craving? Is the threat something they think they can take on and they're going to fight, or is it too big and they're going to shut down? What's their natural inclination? Are they naturally a fighter, or someone who's going to freeze or run away? So it's really looking at, you know, those little conflicts that come in, how they react to them, and what the outcome is going to be. And then the outcome is going to shape the next scene, right? So if they're punished, they're going to react differently in the next scene than if they're rewarded, right? So, or if something neutral happens. So it's really looking at, on a micro level, what action are they taking based on a decision that they're making? And I think that that's really what makes your character, doing that consistently and growing them, you know, in a micro way, step by step, towards this whole macro change.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
Anyone else advice for somebody knee deep in a writer? Go for it, Catrice.
Well, something that's helped me a lot is James Scott Bell. He wrote Writing Your Novel from the Middle. And he's talking about this mirror moment when your character goes from reactive to proactive. And it's generally a moment when they realize they've believed a lie about themselves or about something in their life. They've believed it, they've totally swallowed it, they've internalized it, it's become part of them. And then they realize, no, that's not true. And they go, it flips the switch. And it may take a lot of pushing, a lot of conflict, a lot of messing up. And then all of a sudden you get that point where, oh. And I just I found it so helpful to find that point in the story when you're thinking about it. Even make that the first thing you think about is, what is that moment going to be like? And then you can go from either side. You know, you can write it forward and write it backwards to its beginning point, and forward to its end point.
Great advice.
Yeah.
I love that book. It's really small, but it's a really great book.
Nice. I love it.
Yeah, I second that. Like, the mirror moment is so important, because then it's changing the actions or how they're problem solving and decision making from there forward, right? So yeah, also
right. And it's not easy. It's not an easy thing. It's very hard to make the change. But
yeah, I'm actually mourning a little bit inside right now, because I don't know that I have one in my current work in progress. So now I'm gonna have to go read that book and put one in. Thanks for that, Catrice.
You're welcome.
Another one for the TBR.
Yeah. Kathy, Aaron, y'all have advice for writers? Have y'all already spoken? Again, I'm sorry. I'm a little sick today, so I'm a little out of it.
I would just say that usually as you keep writing, you get to know your character better. And now some people go one way and some people go the other way, and whatever works for you works for you. I'm the type that kind of likes to write the first draft all the way through, and then in revision, make the character maybe more consistent. But if you're the type that has to go back and fix it before you can move on, then do it that way. But probably as you write, you're going to get to know your character better.
Nice. Yeah, my advice goes along with that. I'm going to go super practical. I actually keep stacks of sticky notes around all over the place, and as I write, I discover things about the character, but I don't want to stop and go back and edit. I want to get to the end of the draft, so I literally just write a sticky note and stick it on my wall.
So do you not use Scrivener then, Jeff? Because you can just put that like in the notes column, right?
No, I don't. I just write in Word or Google Docs. I don't use Scrivener.
Good for you.
Yeah.
No,
Yeah.
Scrivener. It's the best $50 I ever spent. Do it.
Scrivener.
I was like, no.
It's made by the devil.
We're gonna have a Scrivener war here right now. Yeah, no, I don't even know who makes it, Catherine. It just feels too complicated to me. I literally just need a white page. Like, That's all I need. But yeah, so I keep my little notes on this side over there about like, and a lot of times, like recently, it was like, change this character's name to this because it'll feel more symbolic. And I might like already like word 100 and 10,000 something words, and I'm like, I guess I got to go through the novel now and change that character's name. Yes, I know how to use find and replace. I know it's not as hard as I'm making it sound, but anyway. All right. Any other advice for writers?
Just don't be afraid to let the character speak to you. Sometimes they will walk onto the page and say, here I am, and I'm the main character. Or, the main character will say, no, I'm not this thing you thought I was. I'm this other thing. Let that happen. Let the characters show you who they are if that happens to you. Don't fight them, because they want you to tell the right story too.
Yeah. Totally.
I had an extra quick thought. Aaron made me think of it. If you need to info dump, do it, because otherwise you're just not going to process what you need to process. So like I have like academy setting things that I write, and sometimes they have to like teach a really big lesson, and I will just info dump and it will be boring. And then I will come back and comb through it and be like, okay, one, what is the teacher's primary goal? What are they trying to teach? What can I cut? Two, how much are the kids actually listening? So how much can I cut there? And then three, like how much are the kids actually going to distract and ask questions that they want to push, and then cut from there. So I'm almost cutting like 3 different levels, and I will reduce thousands of words down to like maybe a couple thousand scene or less. And it's really like getting that cathartic moment to make sure that you understand what was meant to be in the scene and then actually get to what is really happening.
Cut. Yeah. And I think, talking about characters, I think that's great advice, because I think as writers, a lot of times, I know I do, I get caught up in the world that I build. And I feel like the reader needs to know everything I know about the world. And the truth is, they're just there to hang out with the character. They need to know the minimum amount. They don't actually need to know everything that I know about the world, unless you're writing sci-fi. And then they do need to know, but everything else they don't. Yeah, that's great advice on cutting, on writing it, getting it out, and then cutting it. Another fun technique for that, which you kind of mentioned with like the kids interacting around it, is the whole, I think Save the Cat called it Pope in the Pool, where like if you got an info dump, make something crazy happen in the scene and have the info dump happening around that crazy thing, because then we'll enjoy the crazy thing while you're like force feeding us these vegetables. We'll mix the vegetables in a vat of caramel, and I taste the broccoli a lot less and more likely to eat it. Yeah,
it's disgusting.
Yeah, you're welcome.
I have one last little like tip that I use, because I like to think of the characters as getting to know them like you would a friend. If you're really stuck in a section, have a therapy session with your character. Like sit down as if you would talk to a friend and talk to this character. Do it maybe in front of a mirror. I do it to my cat. She can't move, so she just has to sit there and take it. And then
what'd you do to your cat that she can't move? I'm just kidding.
Usually I put her in a box.
Nice.
And then she'll just stay in the box. But
it's amazing. Yeah. Lock your children in a closet, force your kid to have, I'm just kidding. Don't do that.
Yeah. And doing that will help you get through that section. Like act it out if you need to be like, this whole scene. And that will help you feel the emotion of that character.
Nice. Yeah, probably help you really refine the character voice too, I'd imagine. Because when you speak out loud for the character, you're going to start talking like them slowly.
Mm-hmm. Let your roommate definitely know what you're doing though ahead of time. It can be real interesting when they have no clue that you're just talking to yourself for no reason. But we're writers. It's what we do.
This is what we do. We Google weird things and we speak to ourselves in public. All right. Well, y'all, thank you so much for coming on. And I'm just going to say before we hang up the call, y'all are all amazing editors. I think you're fantastic people, and you're all currently accepting clients. So if you're looking for an editor, head over to the Author Life, look up the 3 story method editors. We are all there. You can find our profiles and figure out which editor is the best fit for you. And hire these people. They're amazing people. All right. Anybody have a last word before I turn off the recording? Nope. Great. Too late. I'm turning it off.